In light of Shohei Ohtani becoming the $700 million man, and also because our friend Eric, the card closet, asked me, I wanted to do a little bit of a discussion regarding, just how good is MPB? Just how good are the Japanese leagues right now, today, right? So recently there's been a lot of, I would say, more than any time since Ichiro first came over, more than 20 years ago, from the Oryx Blue Wave, and made the switch to the Mariners. Uh, and then there was like kind of like a little burst of Japanese players that followed him, um, none of whom had the impact of Ichiro. Of course, Hideo Nomo before Ichiro came over, but then following Ichiro, there was definitely a kind of a little bit in the 2000s, there early 2000s. You had kind of a burst in Japanese players following Ichiro, and then that kind of tapered off for a while. But now I would say there's like a little bit more of a Ohtani effect, where Ohtani is kind of sort of ushering in this second Japanese wave. So you have guys, like Yoshinobu Yamamoto isn't signed yet, uh, but will soon for more than $200 million for sure. And then you have guys like Munetaka Murakami and Roki Sasaki, kind of waiting in the wings too. These two will almost certainly also make the move within the next few years to MLB. So a bit of a digression here, but you're seeing like a little bit more Japanese players coming over again, which does kind of beg the question, just how good is MPB? And that's a fair question. The easiest answer is, and I say this as somebody who has watched a fair amount of MPB live and on TV. At this point, I watch quite a bit of Major League Baseball and I watch quite a bit of MPB as well. And of course, the easiest, simplest thing to say is that it is not as good as the major leagues. But that being said, just how good is it? So as I said to Eric Card Closet in a text response, in a comment response, I think the easiest way to think about the level of MPB is like this. MPB, I would say at this point, is essentially a league where the average player in MPB is something like a major league 40-man roster guy. So a kind of AAA player who is a kind of ascended AAA player. He's on the 40-man roster. And he's kind of in a position where he's like a little too good for AAA, but he's probably not going to establish himself in the major leagues with regularity. 40-man roster guy. I'm not like a huge WAR guy or sabermetrics guy, but I would say like in WAR terms, it's like this. Uh, so I snooped around a little bit and I learned that it seems the average major league player, so the average major league player, sort of on established on a major league roster, just a standard average major league regular, will put up between 1.5 and 2 WAR per season, 1.5 to 2 wins above replacement per season. So uh, in contrast, a 40-man roster guy, which would be your sort of that's like your replacement level player, would be like a 40-man roster guy. So a 40-man roster guy as replacement level, you could expect him to put up zero WAR in Major League Baseball. So not negative and not positive. He's replacement level. His WAR total for the year would be zero. And I would say that is pretty much the level, whereas the average major league player is a 1.5 to 2 WAR player, probably the average MPB player is a essentially would be a 0 WAR player at the major league level. So again, the average, I would say, level of MPB is like major league 40-man roster level, which is obviously pretty good. And one thing I will say is that I do think the level of MPB has increased considerably within the last couple few decades. So one thing, for example, 40 years ago, 40 years ago, this guy, Randy Bass, uh, Randy Bass was a major league, also ran a cast off, a guy who couldn't really establish himself in the major leagues. He made the move to NPB, to Japan, and for about half a decade, Bass was one of the best players in Japanese baseball. He was, I mean, Triple Crown, Japan Series champion. Bass became for several years, a top 5 player in MPB at least, year in and year out for that period. So, um, clearly, compared to now, there is definitely the gap has narrowed, I would say. So what I mean by this is you see similar guys kind of doing this in MPB, and they're not getting the same results. So there were a couple guys, at least playing last year in Japan. A couple names I can think of right off the bat. Lewis Brinson, remember him? Aristides Aquino, remember him? Williams Estudillo, La Tortuga, remember him? So these kinds of guys, kind of major league also rans that didn't really end up establishing themselves. These guys came over to Japan, and unlike Randy Bass, they just have not found superstardom. So they didn't just come over here and be stars. In the case of Brinson, he played decently, and Estudillo and Aquino were bad. So yeah, so it's definitely, I would say, within the last couple ish decades, the quality of MPB has definitely increased. And that is not actually a knock on guys like Sadaharu, for instance, who played in MPB in the 60s and 70s. And this is not a knock on him, like Sadaharu is trash because he played in MPB, when it was at the level where Randy Bass could go over and become one of the best players. That is not what I'm saying. So I think guys like Sadaharu and the other big stars were singular talents, even for their time. I absolutely believe that could have played in Major League Baseball in the 60s and 70s. I think Sadaharu would have made the 500 club if he had played in Major League Baseball his entire career. Now remember, Sadaharu hit 800 plus home runs, which is obviously an absurd total, and it's sort of a testament to his singular talent and ability, and then also at a time playing in the league when it was several notches below his own, ability to go out there and hit 800 home runs. So yeah, that's pretty much where I think MPB is at. It's definitely an interesting discussion. Like I said, you got guys coming through the pipeline now. Roki Sasaki, Munetaka Murakami. Those guys I think could definitely be stars in Major League Baseball right now. They're not like I would say obviously it's a bell curve, right? So if you're MPB, the very middle of the bell curve, right? Going back to this idea that the average MPB player is like a 40-man roster guy. The very, middle of the peak of the bell curve would be like a zero war in Major League Baseball kind of guy. And then as you go down on the right side of the bell curve, I would say guys like Murakami, Roki Sasaki, and Yamamoto, but he's coming over now, are, on that very, like, sort of flatter end of the bell curve, like that sort of 95th percentile kind of player. So, yeah, so that's, like I said, in summary, I'd say MPB, the Cliff Notes version, it's basically quadruple A. I think I made this whole video without saying that analogy until now, which I think is like that. I'm not the first person to use that analogy, right? Quadruple A to describe MPB. But I think that's a pretty apt analogy. So, anyway, guys, as always, thanks for watching. Peace.